Chairman and Managing Director at Biocon. Thanks very much for joining us. Kiran, I'll come to you first. First off, reaction assessment of this budget?
Well, I think it was very predictable. I think I have already voiced my, sort of expectations by saying that I really don't expect this to be a budget for India Inc. I had clearly said that this was going to be a socio-economic focused budget. I was expecting, a huge boost, at least an attempted boost to revive the rural economy, agricultural stress. And I think this is what has happened. The government has really focused on investing in boosting rural, investment and hopefully then reviving the rural economy. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing positive in terms of coming out with any bold budgetary reforms. If you can see, even in disinvestment, they've just basically changed the name of the disinvestment, ministry.
Indeed.
It's a euphemism. We need to see whether they're really serious about disinvestment as such. As far as our sector is concerned, okay, they have basically focused again on, increasing the spend on health insurance for rural BPL families. They have talked about PPP models for dialysis centers, generic drug, pharmacies, etc., etc. But I think what is disappointing is that the government has not really taken research and innovation seriously, apart from one silver lining, which is introducing the patent box regime, which will be taxed at a flat 10%. That is certainly welcome news.
Okay.
But to reduce weighted average tax deduction from 200 to 150% was not really necessary.
Okay, I'm going to pause
and
there.
Of course, another important thing is in terms of exemptions, I'm glad they basically reduced the accelerated depreciation to 40% in year one.
Okay, Keki Mistry, I'm putting the same question to you. Does anything stand out in this budget? And if there are sources of disappointment to you, what are they?
I would say the budget is pretty much in line with what one was expecting. The focus largely was on the rural economy. And if we look at the difference between how the urban economy is panning out and how the rural economy is panning out in the last year or so, we clearly see that there is a bit of a disconnect. The urban economy is doing reasonably well in the sense that hotels are running reasonably well, restaurants are reasonably full, shopping malls are full, but the rural economy has been weak for a while and largely because of 2 years of poor monsoons. So this budget was expected to look at, poor people, upliftment of poor people, benefits to rural area, and that's what it has largely delivered. The positive that we see from the budget is on the housing front, that the interest that is payable on a housing loan for a property which is up to 50 lakhs of rupees will get an enhanced deduction of another 50,000 rupees during this year. And I think that's a fairly big benefit, particularly for the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns where property prices tend to be below 50 lakhs. This, of course, will not be a big benefit for a Mumbai or a Delhi, but the smaller towns will get the benefit.
Mr. Mistry, afternoon, Prashant here. Any thoughts on the PSU Bank recap? The amount which has been kept the same essentially as part of the plan which was announced at the time of the last budget, 25,000 crores to recap banks this year.
Well, if you look at the capital requirement of the public sector banks, and we've been hearing different reports, and these numbers are very, very large. But having said that, the finance minister did say that whilst he was allocating 25,000 crores, he'd be willing to look at a larger allocation depending on the need of the public sector banks. And he reiterated the fact that the government wanted to stand behind or stood solidly behind the public sector banks and will not let any of them disappoint or fail. So my sense is, whilst they've allocated 25,000 crores, they will create ways by which the public sector banks will be able to increase their capital base. There are ways of doing it. For example, if you look at the REIT structure, there has been a change which has been made on the REIT structure. Now, I don't know from a tax perspective whether this by itself is enough, but there were just one or two issues because of which the REITs were not being formed in India. And if those issues have been addressed in this budget, and we will be able to see that only when you look at the fine print, then it may be possible for the public sector banks to sell their real estate, which would be worth a tremendous amount of money, capitalize the profit, get the profit in, use that as capital, and at the same time take those properties back on lease from the REIT. So from an operational perspective, nothing changes as far as the banks are concerned.
You know, from what has been done to what has not been done, I think what has not been done also needs a mention. Mrs. Shaw, there was fear that long-term capital gains structure would be tinkered with. I'm sure you must have read many articles about that. There was also talk that service tax would be increased from 14 to 16%. So both those things have not been announced. Maybe we'll have to look for fine print, but I'm sure it would have found a mention in the speech itself. So, I mean, those are positives.
Yeah, I think, by and large, I think if this, budget can actually revive, the rural economy and can boost spending, domestic consumption, then I think, you will see the needle moving. But I think we don't have time to basically execute on a number of these fronts. And I think that is what is going to be critical. That, if you're looking at many of these schemes, I think infra is very important as an investment focus. I think if you look at the kind of schemes they're trying to roll out to boost low-cost housing, to put more money in the hands of the Aam Aadmi so that they can actually increase domestic consumption, I think all these are very positive. And if the rural economy can indeed be boosted, and if you can see that revival, I think it will be a shot in the right direction. Now, having said that, I think much remains to be seen in terms of the fine print. There are some good positives in terms of the kind of measures they've announced for the Aam Aadmi in terms of, putting more money into his hands, giving them a lot of reliefs. But, really, I think we need to see much greater investment in the manufacturing sector. And I don't think much has been done there. Apart from just announcing FDI in food processing, you have to see whether that money is going to come in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Mistry, were you in favor of keeping the fiscal overall spending similar to what they said they would? Or did you feel that there was a need to maybe let go of the targets for a while, spend more, the government taking the lead? So on that regard, are you happy?
Obviously very differing views. One view would be fiscal prudence, and that is what the view that the finance minister has obviously taken, which therefore, in my view, gives now RBI the ability to look at interest rates. Because the fear that the market may have had was that if the fiscal target was enhanced from 3.5 to whatever 3.6 or 3.7 as was widely expected, then that would have led to inflationary pressures, and that would have curtailed RBI's ability to reduce rates. So now RBI, in my sense, does over the next 2 to 3 months have the ability to look at interest rates. So that's the positive of adhering to fiscal discipline.
Okay, I'm going to thank Mr. Mistry, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. Appreciate your time here, straight out of the budget speech.